I need you to understand something about the kind of person who parks their car inside a neighbor's garage without asking. Not in the driveway, not on the street, inside the garage. This is not the behavior of someone who has misread a social situation or made a reasonable assumption that went slightly too far. This is the behavior of someone who has decided, at some fundamental level, that the normal rules of property and permission simply do not apply to them in the way they apply to everyone else. I have thought about this a great deal over the 2 weeks in question, and I have come to believe that people like this are not malicious, exactly. They are something more specific. They are people for whom the line between what they want and what is theirs has become genuinely blurry, and that blurriness is its own kind of problem because it means they are shocked when the world enforces the line on them. Renata Voss was shocked, genuinely, completely, almost touchingly shocked. I was not surprised at all. My name is James Okaffer. I am 47 years old, and I am a project engineer for a water treatment infrastructure company based in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have lived at 33 Birchdale Court in the Brentmore Crossing community in South Charlotte for 6 years. I bought the house because it had a 3-car garage, which is unusual in that neighborhood and which I needed because I own 3 vehicles. My daily driver, a 2019 Tacoma I use for hauling things on weekends, and a 1972 Chevrolet C10 pickup that I have been slowly and lovingly restoring for 4 years. The C10 lives in the 3rd bay of my garage on a set of furniture dollies that let me roll it around for access, covered with a fitted car cover, and it is not currently street legal because it is in mid-restoration and I am not finished with it. It is also not insured for road use for the same reason. It is a garage project, and it lives in the garage, and it is the thing I spend my Saturday mornings on, and it will, when it is done, be one of the finest trucks in Charlotte. I am certain of this. Renata Voss lived at 35 Birchdale Court, directly next to me. She was 51, owned a small event planning business, and had more energy than any one person reasonably needed, and not quite enough outlets for it all. She was the kind of person who was always doing something, always moving, always organizing, and who found stillness uncomfortable and interpreted other people's stillness as an invitation for her to fill. She had been on the Brentmore Crossing HOA Landscaping Committee for 3 years, served as its chair for 2, and had the organizer's habit of treating the world around her as a logistics problem to be solved. We had gotten along reasonably well for 5 years. She was too much for me in large doses, but manageable in small ones, and our houses were close enough that we were unavoidably in each other's orbit a few times a week. I had helped her once when her sprinkler system flooded her side yard, and she needed someone to help shut off the main. She had signed for a package of mine once when I was traveling. The normal texture of neighborly life, thin but functional. The garage situation started because I had a 2-week work trip to Phoenix coming up. Infrastructure project, on-site work, could not be done remotely. I was leaving on a Monday morning and coming back on a Sunday 2 weeks later. I told the neighbors on my immediate left and right as a courtesy, the way you do when you are going to be gone for a while, so that someone with eyes on the house knows the context if something comes up. I told Renata on Thursday, 4 days before I left. She nodded, said she would keep an eye out, asked if I needed anything handled. I said no, I had a house sitter service I used. They would check in twice weekly. She said of course she understood. What Renata understood was apparently something different from what I said, because on Friday evening, 1 day after our conversation, when I was still home, and my garage was occupied in its normal configuration, my Tacoma in Bay 1, my daily driver in Bay 2, the C10 in Bay 3, I went to the garage to get something from my tool cabinet and found Renata's Mercedes GLC parked in Bay 1. Not in my driveway, not parked partially on my property near the driveway, inside my garage, in the bay that she apparently knew was the one I moved my Tacoma out of when I left for trips, because I preferred to leave it at the long-term lot at the airport. I stood in the doorway of my own garage and looked at Renata's Mercedes, and I did what I always do in situations that require thought, which is I said nothing, did nothing, and went back inside to think. I knew immediately how she had gotten in. My garage has a keypad outside, and a door from the kitchen into the garage. The keypad code was a 4-digit number that I had mentioned to Renata once, 2 years earlier, when she had needed to retrieve something from my garage on my behalf when I was at work, and a delivery had been made to my house that she had signed for and put inside for me. I had given her the code for that specific purpose and had not thought about it since, because giving someone a code for a one-time specific purpose and then not revoking it is the kind of small administrative oversight that most neighbors never have a reason to exploit. Renata had held onto the code for 2 years and had now used it to park her car in my garage. I thought about why. I thought about it carefully. The most charitable interpretation was that she had parking pressure of some kind, visitors at her house, perhaps, or a situation in her own driveway that I was not aware of. The event planning business meant she sometimes had catering vehicles or client cars or delivery situations that created temporary congestion. Maybe she had decided, with the specific logic of someone who conflates access with permission, that since I had given her the code, and since I was leaving soon anyway and Bay 1 would be empty, using it temporarily was fine. The least charitable interpretation was that she was going to use my garage during my 2-week absence as a matter of course, because it was more convenient than whatever alternative she had. I thought about these interpretations, and I thought about the fact that she had not asked and had not mentioned it in our conversation on Thursday and had apparently just done it. And I concluded that the least charitable interpretation was probably closer to accurate, because someone who was doing a genuinely reasonable temporary thing would have mentioned it in the conversation where I told her I was leaving. I knocked on her door. She answered it with the cheerful energy of someone in the middle of organizing something. She said, "James, hi, what's up?" I said, "Your car is in my garage." She said, "Oh, I hope you don't mind. I've got my nephew and his family visiting this weekend, and I needed the extra space. I figured, since you're leaving Monday anyway." I said, "I do mind, and I gave you that code 2 years ago for a specific situation. It is not standing permission to use my garage." She said, "Of course, I'm sorry, I didn't think you'd care since you were about to leave. I'll move it first thing tomorrow morning." She said it with the breezy ease of someone who was not actually sorry, but understood that an apology was the expected social response to the current moment. I recognized this quality. It was the same quality that produces the second incident and the third, because someone who apologizes without understanding what they are apologizing for does not change the behavior. I said, "I'd like you to move it tonight." She said, "Tonight, James, it's 9 o'clock." I said, "I understand. I would like my garage to contain my vehicles, not yours." She moved it. She did it with some of the energy of someone doing me an inconvenient favor, and when she came back to her door she said, with the first edge I had heard in her voice, I said I'd move it. I said, "Thank you, and I am going to change the garage code tonight." She said, "That's not necessary." I said, "It is, actually." I changed the code that evening. I did not give Renata the new code. On Saturday, I moved my Tacoma to the airport lot where I always left it. On Sunday, I put my daily driver in Bay 1 and the C10 remained in Bay 3 as always. On Sunday evening, I did the specific thing that I had decided to do on Thursday night when I was thinking about this. I have a smart garage door system. It was installed 3 years ago, and it connects to my phone and to my home network, and it allows me to open and close the garage doors remotely from anywhere with a cell signal. I can also, and this is the relevant feature, set the doors to mode the manufacturer calls secured, which disables the exterior keypad and the interior wall button and allows door operation only through the app on my registered phone. In secured mode, no code, no matter how recently changed, will open the door. The only way in or out is through the app. On Sunday night, before I went to bed, I activated secured mode on all 3 garage bays. On Monday morning, I left for Phoenix. My house sitter service, a company called Watchful Home, which sent a person to check on properties and collect mail and water plants and generally make sure nothing had gone wrong, had my contact information and a set of house keys for the front and back doors and the code for the side gate. They did not have garage access and did not need it. I had briefed them on the trip. I was in Phoenix by midday Monday, checked into my hotel, and started my project work. The work was genuinely absorbing. We were troubleshooting a membrane filtration system that had been underperforming, and I did not think about Charlotte or Renata Voss or my garage for the first several days. On Wednesday, 4 days after I left, I got a call from an unknown Charlotte area number. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was from Renata. Her message said that one of her relatives, she said cousin, then corrected herself to say her nephew's wife's sister, had parked in my garage on Sunday before I left, and the door seemed to be locked, and she was wondering if I could unlock it. I listened to the voicemail twice. Renata's relative had parked in my garage on Sunday before I left. I sat with this for a moment. I was in Phoenix, 1,200 miles away, and someone connected to Renata was in my garage in Charlotte. I opened the garage app. All 3 doors were in secured mode. I checked the interior camera I had in the garage, which I had installed 3 years ago when I was storing some equipment for work temporarily and which I had left in place because it was useful to check on the C10 remotely. The camera showed my daily driver in Bay 1, the C10 in Bay 3, and in Bay 2, the bay that was normally empty when my Tacoma was at the airport, a silver Honda Pilot that I did not recognize and had not authorized. Someone, using the old code that I had changed Saturday night, had somehow gotten into my garage with a Honda Pilot. I thought about this. The old code would not work because I had changed it Saturday. The new code was only in my phone and had not been shared with anyone. Secured mode was active and required the app. Then I remembered I had changed the keypad code on Friday night. I had activated secured mode on Sunday night. There was a window of approximately 48 hours where the new keypad code was active, but secured mode was not yet enabled. Renata or someone connected to her had obtained the new code. I was not sure how. Possibly she had watched me enter it, possibly something else, and had used it during that Saturday to Sunday window to park the Honda Pilot in Bay 2. The Honda Pilot was in my garage. Secured mode was active. The car was not going anywhere without the app. I called Renata back. She answered on the first ring and said, with the tone of someone who has been waiting, "Oh good, James, I was worried you didn't get my message. So my cousin's my nephew's wife's sister. She parked in your garage. I hope that was okay. She needed a safe spot for the car for the week, and I thought you'd be fine with it since you were gone anyway, and now she can't get the door open and she needs her car." I said, "Renato." She said, "Yes." I said, "When I left on Monday, your relative's car was not in my garage." A pause, she said, "It must have been there already, maybe she came by Sunday." I said, "Renata, I have a camera in my garage. I have footage from Sunday evening through Monday morning. My car was in Bay 1, Bay 2 was empty, Bay 3 had my C10. The Honda Pilot arrived at Bay 2 on Saturday evening. I have it on footage." Silence. I said, "I changed my garage code on Friday night after I asked you to remove your car. Someone, between Friday night and Sunday night, when I activated the door lock, obtained my new code and used it to park in my garage." Maury silence. She said, "James, I'm sure this can all be sorted out very easily. She just needs her car." I said, "I know she needs her car. I want to discuss how this happened before I do anything about the door." She said, "James, it's just a car." I said, "It is my garage. This is the second time in a week that someone has parked in my garage without my permission. I would like to understand how the code was obtained." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, with an exasperation that told me everything I needed to know about her actual level of remorse, I told her the code. "Okay." I told her because she needed a safe place to park, and I knew you were going to be gone, and I didn't think you would actually mind. I said, "You gave someone the garage code that you no longer had authorization to give." She said, "It's just a garage, James." I said, "I will be in touch about the car." I ended the call. Part 2. I called Patricia home from my Phoenix hotel room that evening. I told her the complete sequence. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "You have camera footage of the unauthorized entry." I said, "I have footage of the car entering before I activated secured mode. I have the timestamps. I have the voicemail from Renata acknowledging she gave the code to her relative." Patricia said, "The voicemail is very helpful. An HOA matter this is not, but an unauthorized use of your property matter it definitely is. What would you like to do?" I thought about it. I was 1,200 miles away, and I had a week and a half of project work left, and the car was not hurting anything sitting in Bay 2 in secured mode. The relative who owned the Honda Pilot was having a significantly worse week than I was, which was not my intention, but was also not my problem in the way that Renata seemed to think it was. I said, "I am going to let the situation sit for a few days. I would like you to send a formal letter to Renata documenting what happened and asking for a written explanation of how the code was obtained and transmitted, and noting that the unauthorized use of my garage is a trespassing matter." Patricia said, "I can do that. What about the car?" I said, "The car is in secured mode. The relative can contact me directly to discuss retrieving it, and we can have an adult conversation about what happened." Patricia sent the letter the next day. Certified mail, return receipt. The letter was factual and direct and asked for a written response within 5 business days. Honda Pilot's owner called me the next morning. She had gotten my number from Renata, presumably. Her name was Tess, and she was actually quite reasonable in a situation that was not her fault in the fullest sense. She had been told by Renata that parking in my garage was fine, that I had said it was fine, and she had parked there in good faith based on that representation. She had not known that no such permission had been given, and she had not known the code situation was unauthorized. She was apologetic in a way that felt genuine because she had clearly been told a version of events that differed from the actual version. I told her I appreciated her calling and I explained what had happened. She was quiet for a moment and then said, "Renata told me you said it was okay." I said, "Renata did not have my permission to extend that representation." She said, "I'm sorry, this is embarrassing." I said, "It is not your fault. I would like to talk to you briefly about a few things, and then we can figure out getting your car." We talked for about 20 minutes. Tess told me, with increasing discomfort, that Renata had been describing my garage as available to use while I traveled for the past several months. Not just this trip, months. She said Renata had offered it to at least 2 other people she could think of as a convenient, secure parking option in a neighborhood where parking was sometimes challenging during events. I let that settle for a moment. Renata had been operating my garage as a de facto neighborhood parking amenity, using a code I had given her 2 years ago for a single specific purpose, for at minimum several months. I thanked Tess for telling me. I told her I would remote open her garage door within the hour so she could retrieve her car. I did exactly that when we ended the call, and I watched on the camera as she drove out and the door closed behind her. I reactivated secured mode immediately. Tess called me back 20 minutes after retrieving her car. She said, "I'm going to be honest with you. Renata has used that code a lot. I know of 4 or 5 times at least. Different people, different situations. She told everyone you were fine with it." I thanked her again. I called Patricia back and told her what Tess had told me. Patricia said, "That changes the character of this considerably. Repeated, unauthorized use of your property over an extended period, facilitated by someone you trusted with limited access for a specific purpose. That is not a single trespass. That is an ongoing pattern of unauthorized entry." She said, "I want to amend the letter we sent, and I think we should talk about the HOA angle." The HOA angle was this. The Brentmore Crossing HOA had a security and property access policy in its community standards, Section 14, which covered unauthorized access to resident property within the community and gave the HOA board the ability to formally censure residents who interfered with neighbors' property rights. It was a rarely invoked provision, but it was there, and the documented pattern of Renata giving out my garage access code to multiple people over multiple months was exactly the kind of thing it was designed to address. Patricia amended the letter and sent a second one that same day, this one to both Renata and to the HOA board, documenting the full sequence. The original code shared for a limited purpose, the Friday incident with Renata's own car, the code change, the Honda Pilot, the voicemail, and Tess's account of the broader pattern of use over several months. The letter to the board requested that they review the matter under Section 14. I went back to my filtration system work in Phoenix. I had 5 more days of project work, and I was not going to let Renata Voss's ongoing poor decision-making follow me 1,200 miles into a water treatment plant. The board meeting was scheduled for 3 weeks out. I would be back by then. Patricia said to let the letters work while I was away. Renata called me 4 more times while I was in Phoenix. I did not answer. I let each call go to voicemail. The messages were a progression. The first was indignant. The second was conciliatory. The third was apologetic in a way that still contained some residual indignation. And the fourth was simply a quiet message saying she would like to talk when I got back. I returned from Phoenix on a Sunday as planned. I spent Sunday unpacking and doing the things you do when you come home after 2 weeks away. I moved my daily driver back to Bay 2. I checked on the C10. I reorganized the garage. Everything was as I had left it when I had last been in the garage, which was before I left, because the secured mode had kept it exactly as I had left it. Monday morning, I went to Renata's door. She answered it quickly, which told me she had been watching for me. She looked like someone who had spent 2 weeks in varying degrees of discomfort about a situation she had created. She said, "James, I want to talk." I said, "Yes, that's why I'm here." We sat at her kitchen table. She had coffee ready, which told me she had been expecting this and had prepared for it. She looked at the table and then at me. She said, "I'm sorry. I am genuinely sorry. I know that what I told you when it started was that it was just temporary, just for the weekend. But it wasn't. I've been giving people that code for several months. I told myself you wouldn't care because you weren't using the space and everyone needed parking. I told myself a lot of things. I said, "You told people I said it was okay." She said, "Yes." I said, "Why?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because saying I had the code to a neighbor's garage and was lending it out without asking would have sounded wrong, and I didn't want to deal with thinking about whether it was wrong. So I said you had approved it, and then I believed my own version." This was, I thought, one of the more honest things anyone had said to me in the context of these kinds of situations. Most people who do what Renata had done never reach the part of the conversation where they say, "I believed my own version." She had gotten there. I appreciated it. I said, "I need a few things from you. I need a written statement, which Patricia Holmes' office will draft, acknowledging what happened and confirming that you do not have access to my property in any form. I need you to contact the people you gave the code to and tell them the actual situation. And I need to know there is nothing else of mine you have access to that I am not aware of." She said, "I have a spare key to your side gate. You gave it to me when you had the fence work done 3 years ago." I said, "I need that back." She went and got it. She put it on the table between us. I said, "Anything else?" She said, "No, I promise." We went through the written statement process through Patricia over the following week. Renata signed it. The HOA board reviewed the matter under Section 14 and issued a formal censure, which was entered in the meeting minutes. It was not a dramatic punishment. It was a record. Brentmore Crossing HOA's records now show that Renata Voss was formally censured for unauthorized facilitation of access to a neighbor's private property. If there is ever a future incident, that record exists. I had the smart garage system updated to a new app account with stronger authentication. I had the keypad code changed again. I documented all of the changes. Renata and I have not had a substantial conversation since the kitchen table meeting. We see each other and we nod and we move on. which is the relationship that exists after a significant breach has been acknowledged and resolved but not forgotten. It is not warm, it is civil, that is sufficient. The C10 is in Bay 3, where it belongs. I spent the first 2 Saturdays after I got back working on the engine bay, which needed more attention than I had gotten to before Phoenix. The carburetor was rebuilt, the fuel lines replaced, the valve cover gaskets done. The truck is getting closer to what it is going to be. I can feel that when I am working on it, the same way you can feel a project approaching its completion, that quality of things coming together into something that has its own integrity. The garage is 3 bays. They contain my vehicles. The doors are in secured mode when I leave. Everything in its place, everything accounted for, everything mine. The system works exactly as designed. Thumbnail text. She had MY code 4 MONTHS. I had it all on camera.